Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 216 of the Last Round Podcast. Thank you again for joining us after a busy weekend of boxing. All the major players were seemingly involved in putting on an event. I believe ESPN, The Zone. Who else am I missing? Showtime, obviously. All the major players and promoters were all active this past weekend, which is great for us and the content that we deliver each and every week. And our guest of the week, Chaudhry, a digital executive, filmmaker, producer, all-around digital landscape guy. That interview will be towards the middle to end of this episode. But before we kind of jump into his a little bit later, let's do our regular, syllabus of stuff here on the Last Round Podcast. Fight reviews this past Saturday, the 8th of April, from the Dignity Health Sports Park in Carson, California, in the Los Angeles area here in Southern California. On Showtime, Brian Mendoza gets the 7th round KO in an early candidate, maybe leading candidate for upset of the year, over Sebastian Fundora, who takes the first professional loss of his career. Mendoza gains the WBC interim, if you want to call it that, interim super welterweight title at 154 pounds. We touched on this last week, Mike. Obviously, we previewed it. I believe I said, and I'm pretty sure I got to go back and listen, but I know I gave Mendoza. I know I kind of said that it was kind of it was going to be an exciting fight. I thought Mendoza was game, but I still thought Fundora was going to take it. But Mendoza was going to come in and produce some fireworks. I didn't think it was going to end like that. Were you surprised? What'd you think?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be there, to be ringside for that. If I remember rightly, I didn't really give Mendoza a chance. I thought Fundora, especially after his recent appearances, I thought he was going to kind of brush him aside because it seemed like Mendoza was more of like a treading water fight until we got Charlo back into the ring and stuff like that, and then we eventually got some of those bigger fights later down the line. But yeah, Fundora was pretty much winning every single round up until Mendoza was caught him with that beautiful. It was kind of like a hook come sort of like uppercut type thing, like the way that he kind of threw it was perfect. Caught him square on the chin. Fundora's legs had gone. Fundora, I think you could just tell, didn't even make an attempt to get up. He kind of just sat up, didn't he? Looked at the referee, kind of smiled to himself, and his legs were gone. Quite even when they walked him back down the alley, I guess whatever you call it, back down into the locker room, he was still getting supported by the commission. His legs were completely gone. And Brian Mendoza, great speech afterwards, talking about how he'd had a few losses, he never gave up. Even in this fight, I think he even touched on he was losing every single round, and back in the day he would have kind of lost heart and would have given up. But just what he's gone through, moving to Las Vegas, joining a new team, being in there with Ishmael Salas, just gave him a whole lease of life, and he's a WBC interim super welterweight champion of the world. What a story for him. What a performance. Enormous underdog going into the fight, and that just shows what you can do with training hard, having that self-belief.
What's the percentage chance that we see a rematch?
That's a good question, because it seemed like that they'd kind of put a lot of backing behind Fundora, didn't it? After he'd had those early performances, I think that they noticed that, he's so big, people always know he's got a cool nickname, Towering Inferno. Unfortunately, this didn't sell at all. The Dignity Health and Sports Park was completely dead. Didn't sell out at all. Probably, I'd be lucky if it was 50% full. So I'm not too sure if, Fundora sells, but like you touched on, it was a crazy weekend of boxing all around, and UFC and other sports. Baseball started over here in, America. So it was up against a lot of things, which, could be the reason why it was, didn't sell too good. But that's a good one. I don't know what they may do because the division's kind of on hold at the minute. But it was a pretty conclusive knockout, right? He caught him and that was it gone, even though we'd lost probably the first 6 rounds. I think you could probably give all of the rounds to Fundora.
I think that's what definitely produces a rematch within the next, 6 months or so, 5 to 6 months, is that Fundora was winning the fight up until that point, and then Mendoza caught him. It's kind of like, remember Gabe Rosado and Beck the Bully? Beck the Bully was beating him up until that point, and Rosado caught him, boom, right in that corner and knocked him out and got a big win out of it. It was it was very similar. It was very similar to this one. Fundora was beating him, then Mendoza, boom, catches him, knocks him out. So I think they run it back because I would assume Showtime, PBC have, the confidence in Fundora and thinking, okay, he was winning the fight. He could beat this guy, and then we're back on track. Because you're right. There's always an A side and a B side. Their unofficial support was behind Fundora, showcasing him and all that. But Mendoza spoiled those plans. He spoiled those plans. So, but if I was Mendoza, I would expect to have a rematch and then make a rematch, PBC, Showtime, and have him train even harder for this next one. Hopefully this win kind of gives him the confidence. Hey, I beat this. I caught him once. I can catch him again. But Fundora's. I think Fundora is talented. I think he is talented, and he just got caught. It's the fight game. It's the fight game. But yeah, I think we see the rematch within the next 5-6 months, maybe even sooner. But yeah, definitely the next 5-6 months. And then Mendoza, he has to try to keep the momentum going. He's on a 3-fight win streak after this win this past Saturday, going back to March 26, 2022, when he had a TKO victory over Benjamin Whitaker. And then a couple months later, about 6-7 months later, November 5th, 2022, his biggest win up until that date over Jason Rosario, former unified champion at 154. He knocked him out. So Mendoza, his last 2 fights before stopping Fundora were knockouts. And now, including Fundora, his last 3 fights are knockouts. So his last 2 fights especially are big wins against Jason Rosario, former unified champion, 154 pounds, and now Sebastian Fundora. Even though Fundora hasn't been able to win a full world title yet, Fundora was being groomed to get to that point. So, yeah, I mean, big props to Brian Mendoza. He was game. And then, like you said, the speech he had in the post-fight was very admirable. It was great. You can tell he was a little emotional there. And then also big props to Fundora. He had a lot of class in his defeat. Talked about like, hey, it's the boxing game. Let's see how he bounces back from his first loss. Because, we've seen it in the game multiple times. And sometimes when fighters suffer their first loss, mentally it starts affecting them. And it's kind of hard for them to kind of get that fire back in them. I wouldn't, if I had to guess, I think Fundora is he'll be good. Kind of get right back on the bicycle, start training hard, and kind of come back at it. I think he's a talented kid, but we'll see. Sometimes these losses really, really affect these fighters, especially the younger fighters. With the mental health being such a big issue right now, social media age and stuff. People are always kind of out there and watching and judging and all that stuff. So. Let's see how Fundora bounces back, but I think he bounces back if I had to guess. And then Mendoza, if I was Mendoza, I'd be preparing for a rematch because I'm sure Showtime, PBC are going to try to run that back, to try to get Fundora back in that victory column. So we'll see because I think we all know that even though Charlo has kind of been on the sidelines for almost 2 years now, which is kind of ridiculous because he has all the belts. I'm sure Showtime and PBC were angling for that fight between a Fundora and Charlo. I'm sure that they were angling for that fight. Put that in Vegas, maybe in California, maybe in Texas. But obviously, those plans are hit a bit of a roadblock right now. So we'll see how it goes. But
what do you think, Danny, to the fact that I saw some people on Twitter saying that, it's a good job he didn't face Charlo. Charlo would have put a real beat down on him, and he kind of got exposed. The usual thing that people go to.
Oh yeah, that happens every time.
What do you think of that? You think Charlo would have mopped the floor with him, or we know?
Well, I think Charlo would have been the favorite going into that fight. I would have agreed with that, but Fundora. I mean, the thing with Fundora is he got that height and that reach. He's 6'5". Making 154 pounds, You
think that's one of the reasons that I'm taking nothing away from Mendoza. Mendoza has a high percentage knockout ratio. I'm just asking this question because we ask questions that we hear and we see. You think maybe he's boiling himself down too much, and that's why his legs were completely gone and he was struggling to walk even after the fight?
Fundora?
Yeah,
maybe. I mean, I think that's a reasonable take. Because I've always thought, it's like, man, how do you make that weight? He says he makes it fine, and his team says he makes it really fine, but it's just kind of like, I would love to hear like a doctor's take or something. Like I'm sure it's like, what a doctor say or a medical professional would say, like, hey, is this good for them? Like, even though they say, hey, no, I can make the weight, I don't have any trouble, it works for them, but like, their height ratio and reach ratio and all that, is it overall a positive for the health of their body to make it to that weight all the way down like that? Like that. I mean, I'd be very interested to hear an explanation or an analysis behind something like that, because you're right, maybe it affected his legs, who knows? Obviously we're speculating, but he's been saying that he can make the weight, so you gotta trust the fighter sometimes.
Put it into perspective. I'm 6'3", and I'm 60, 70 pounds heavier, and you're taller than me.
Yeah. I outweigh him by 100 pounds.
Right, and you're a similar height to him.
Yeah, I'm like an inch and a half taller than him. Yeah. I think that's the first time we ever said that on air. How talk about our heights here. Obviously, the boxing people know who've seen that at events know, but yeah. So yeah, you're right. I mean, we're both tall guys. You're a little bit shorter than he is. I'm a little bit taller than he is, but we both outweigh him. Outweigh him by between 60 and 100 pounds. It's pretty nuts. But let's see how he bounces back. But I would guess a rematch is in the subsequent plans before the end of the year. But we'll see. We'll see what what's going to happen with Showtime. And it's interesting to see the landscape, but we'll see how it goes forward. And then where Charlo is, we don't know what they haven't really given an update on Charlo. We don't know what's going on with right there. When does it get to a point where maybe you should strip somebody? But obviously Charlo makes money. These sanctioning bodies get cuts out of these fights, especially the more lucrative ones. So who knows? But it's getting to that point, man. It's getting to that point where like, hey man, come on, you have all the titles and you can't fight, and it's coming up on multiple years here. So we will see. In the co-main event, Brandon Lee remains undefeated at 28-0 with the 10-round unanimous decision win over Pedro Campa by scores of 97-93, 99-91, and 98-92. What do you think about this fight?
Great fight to watch. Campa has an unbelievable chin, and it was strange how Brandon Lee was cheered coming into the ring. Did a pretty dominant performance, as you can see by the scores that you just read out. Yet Campa was cheered after the fight, and Brandon Lee was kind of booed, even though he won and did a pretty good performance. It was just Campa's unbelievable chin. And for people that recognize the name, he'd previously been in there with Teofimo Lopez. Lopez won by TKO in the 7th round. So I thought it was a good performance from Brandon Lee. He's got a very good, stylish way of fighting, drops his hands, gets people to come in, puts in good combinations, sometimes throwing 3, 4, 5, 6 punches in one go. So he's definitely a TV fighter. Would have been good for him to, get Camper out there, but, God, he tried. The amount of big punches that, Camper was taking, his face was pretty badly beaten and bruised. So yeah, I thought it was a good performance from Brandon Lee overall. I don't think there was at any point did we see him, rocked or in any sort of trouble. And I thought it was good that they've also said that they think they need another, another performance like that in terms of they need someone else that's, pushes Lee and, is in there and takes him, quite a lot of rounds because, Brandon Lee's had quite a lot of knockouts early on in his career. So they want some, people that are going to give him good 10 rounds.
I mean, he's almost at 30 fights, man. Like, is he actually promoted? Like, does he have an agreement with PBC Al Heyman? Like in terms of some type of advisory committee or advisory role? Because remember we talked about Arnold Barboza I forgot who it was. It might have been Abe Gonzalez, where we talked about Arnold Barboza fighting on Top Rank, but Barboza is actually, because we talked about the issue that Barboza has 30 fights or almost 30 fights and hasn't really made that step up or, hasn't had that world title fight. It's like, come on, man, it's been quite a few fights. And I think Abe said, Barboza's actually his main promoter. I believe it was Barboza. I could be wrong, but it was somebody that said, so-and-so's actual promoter is this. And they just have been using Top Rank as their broadcast partner and as their co-promoter because they're trying to give him dates. Or was it a PBC? It was somebody with PBC, I think, wasn't it?
I can remember the conversation the same as you, but I can't remember who we were talking about now.
We were talking about somebody. You know what? I think it is. I think it was a PBC Showtime fighter who was fighting on their network, but they were actually their main promoter was somebody else, which is why PBC wasn't putting them against PBC. Showtime wasn't matching them with their big guys and the big fights. I'm pretty sure now that I think about it. I thought it was Top Rank, but I think it was PBC Showtime. But I mean, I'm not aware of Brandon Lee, but I would assume he's managed by Al Heyman, advised by Al Heyman, PBC. Do we know?
I believe so. I believe he is. And then I think maybe it's just due to, I'm not too sure about his amateur career, so I'm assuming that maybe he just had a small amateur career, and that's why he's had 28 fights and he's only 23 years old. But you can see that he's, he definitely is improving. So, and he's still got time on his side as well. You can still got another 10 years or so of his pro career to go. Yeah.
But at 28-0, we kind of should give him something. Here. Moving on, Gabriel Maestre gets the 5th win of his professional career over. He's still going. The long reigning Devin Alexander, who takes the 8th professional loss of his career. What'd you think about this fight?
Good fight. I thought going in, Maestro would probably win, and I don't know whether Devin just took the easy way out. I know that he was saying that he sat down at the end of the round and then said he was having some problems with his heart, like heart palpitations, and then. Obviously they had to call it off. They couldn't let him, back out for the next round. David also came in, overweight. So I think this could be the last performance we see of him. I think maybe he just came for a quick payday and maybe he's done. I was surprised to see he's actually younger than I am. I thought he'd been around for. I thought he was closer to 40. It seems like he's been around for so long.
He's been around for so long. I mean, he was in the Tim Bradley era and all that stuff. He has been around. He has been around. Sometimes they survive, man, and it works out. But we will see. Also on the card, Frank Sanchez, a heavyweight matcher, remains undefeated with the quick night first round KO over Daniel Martz. Martz was down twice, and then obviously tasted defeat again for the 11th time. I saw some chatter online before this fight that Daniel Martz shouldn't even been involved in this fight. That Sanchez was just too much for him, and Martz is just kind of being thrown out there as an opponent. But Sanchez obviously, he's a still rising contender in the heavyweight division, but I thought the more interesting part out of this fight was that Sanchez returned with his, I guess, recently old trainer in Eddie Reynoso in San Diego. Because I don't know if people remember, but Frank Sanchez left to go train with Joe Goossen's gym when Ryan Garcia left Canelo's camp. And him and Ryan Garcia were both being trained by Eddie Reynoso. And then Ryan left. There was some beef there with the Canelo camp. And then Frank Sanchez also left. And we had talked about it before on one of the past episodes. And that's because that Frank Sanchez was also being advised by, I believe his name is Lupe Valencia. He's known for representing a lot of PBC guys, a lot of PBC fighters. And I think he also represents Ryan Garcia now and Frank Sanchez. So I thought that was very intriguing. Like, I wonder what happened. Maybe Frank Sanchez thought, oh, you know what? This isn't working over here. And he went back to Eddie Reynoso. I would love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. Hey, I'm going back with Canelo and his team because, I feel more comfortable over here. I don't think this was the right move. Because I thought, oh, he left and he went with Ryan and, is there beef between Sanchez and the Canelo camp? But no, he went back. So I thought that was interesting. What did you think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I don't know whether it's anything to do with the fact that I know Frank Sanchez won this fight. A fight we're going to talk about in a minute is Chris Arreola. And I believe that PBC had stuck these on the same card because they're trying to place them together in the next fight coming up. So that would be interesting to see if that's something that they do. But good performance, I thought, from Frank Sanchez. Daniel March wasn't really much. It's intriguing to see that Daniel March has actually been in with a whole host of names that we talk about. Fabio Wardley, Simon Keane, Prince Charles Martin, Luis Ortiz, Brian Jennings, Joseph Parker, just to name a few. So he's been in with a whole host of names, the poor guy.
Yeah. And then also running off the card, Chris Arreola, former heavyweight title contender and challenger. He also makes a quick night with the second round KO over Matthew McKinney, who takes the 7th loss of his professional career. So I'm just going to ask you this straight out. Are we looking at a Chris Arreola, Frank Sanchez matchup in the next 6-7 months?
Yeah, that seems to be what all the rumors are. They stuck them on the same card together with opponents that were pretty easy, kind of cannon fodder type guys, and to make them both look good. So yeah, well, why not? And it's a good name, isn't it, for someone like Frank Sanchez, who's obviously still kind of coming up the hill, even though he's kind of a little bit old. To face someone like Chris Arreola. Arreola's been in there, challenge for the world championship. So, it's a good opponent for Frank Sanchez to be in with, especially if we put it in the Southern California area. Arreola's still, you could see even now, when I was at the event, they love him. They love Arreola, being like a Mexican heavyweight. Obviously, he was the first one, really, right? Before like Andy Ruiz kind of hit the scene and, obviously got the world title.
Yeah. Arreola was the closest when he fought Klitschko at Staples Center like in 2009 or something. He had a big fan base, man. He did.
He still does because he's kind of like that blue-collar working man of the people, right? You can still see him in a bar. He'll talk to the fans. He'll take pictures of everybody. So I think Arreola, Frank Sanchez, Maine, co-main in the Southern California area. Give me that. Take my money. I'll buy a ticket.
Yeah. I'm a fan of that matchup. I am. Also, this past Saturday from the Boeing Center at Techport, San Antonio, Texas, on the zone, Jesse Bam Rodriguez remains undefeated as well with a 12-round unanimous decision win over Christian Gonzalez Hernandez. This was for the vacant WBO flyweight title. Bam Rodriguez, once again, world champion. He continues to impress and become the youngest world champion in boxing. But what was very crazy is that Rodriguez had his jaw fractured during the fight and still continued and ended up winning the fight. That's scary, man. That's scary in any combat sport. And if people didn't know that, like, just go look at his DAZN post-fight interview with Chris Mannix. You could see him talk, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, you broke my." You can see it. It's right. The evidence is right there, and he says it, and then you can just see his jaw moving. That's crazy, man. That's crazy. And he continued the fight, and he ended up winning and getting another world title. at 112 pounds. What do you think?
Good performance from Rodriguez. Really is, one of the best fighters down at, flyweight or super flyweight. Hopefully now we'll see all of those guys in together, like we said last week. Sonny Edwards, Jesse Bam Rodriguez, Julio Martinez, even, the guys above those, Chocolatito, Juan Francisco Estrada, all those guys, stick those in together. And, we've got a whole host of great fights to look forward to. Obviously, Bam's going to be off for a little while, so I believe Sonny Edwards is going to be fighting someone in between. Martinez is also already scheduled with an opponent on the Canelo card on May 6th. So once those two are fought and Bam's recovered from his broken jaw, then take my money again. I'm down for any of those mixture of fights. Just give me those. Let's have a super flight card like in the old Tom Loeffler days.
Yeah, bring it back to the Forum or Carson, California, out here in LA. Those are great cards, man. Those are great cards. Also on the card, and another, I guess, upset, if you want to call it, Marlon Tapales, 37-3, gets the split decision win over MJ Murad. I can never say MJ. We just call him Akhmadaliev, who takes the first loss of his career. Tapales is now the IBF and WBA super bantamweight champion. And he won by scores of 115-113 twice and 118-110 for MJ. So it was kind of, if you just look at the scorecards, it was just like, oh, okay, well, who really took the fight? 118-110 and then 115-113. So, who took this fight? I mean, what did you think about the matchup?
Good fight. Shock to me. I thought MJ, big fan of him. I love his style. I thought he was going to take this. But I don't know. Was it the injuries? I believe when he was last out, I think he broke both hands. And this was his first fight back. So I don't know whether it was that made him like a little bit tentative, or maybe I'm just taking too much away from Tapales, like you said. And maybe it was just the game plan that he had. Tapales really early on just knocked up a lot of rounds. And then MJ kind of built into the fight, but it was too late. So Tapales took a 115, 113 twice. The 118, 110 was just outrageous. It was that judge should be looked at for that one. But the right guy won on the night, and maybe they'll roll it back, because I know selfishly as fans, I think we were all waiting for the Inoue Fulton fight, and then the winner of those guys was hopefully going to face MJ in a undisputed fight. For all of the belts in that division. Obviously, now that will probably go to Tapales unless MJ and Matchroom throw some money at him and, convince him to run it back.
And Marlon Tapales, I think, is a Manny Pacquiao fighter under his stable, because I think Sean Gibbons was there. I saw him pop up. So I'm assuming Tapales is under the Manny Pacquiao guidance and stable over there. So, hey, man, you got to give it to Pacquiao and his team and Gibbons over there. They find these Filipino fighters, they can fight. It's just like Samson boxing. They always produce these opponents for these A-side fighters, and they end up getting the upset wins. Like, there's fighters out there and promoters like Samson Boxing, Samson Lukowitz, and Pacquiao's team over there, and Shaw Gibbons and all those guys. They're fighting these talents all over the world, who could fight. And they end up coming and becoming the spoiler in these fights. So, yeah, shout out to those teams and finding that type of talent all over the world, because it's definitely good for the global health of the sport.
Yeah, that's what you should do. If you're watching a fight, and especially if you're in the UK and you've got access to like a betting website just on your cell phone, the fight comes on, you see Sean Gibbons walking out with the opponent. Just log on to Ladbrokes, William Hill, any of those betting sites, and just stick a few pounds, a few dollars on the opponent, because God knows how many times over the years have we seen those guys come away. Like recently, like Louis Lopez, when he shocked Josh Warrington. That's another Sean Gibbons guy.
Right. And also, speaking of Sean Gibbons, really quick, he is the California Athletic Commission has recently it came out that
banned him.
That they banned him after I think the last PBC card that was in I think it was Ontario, California, here in Southern California or something like that. But he's been banned. I think there was a letter that was circulating on boxing Twitter. Somebody posted, and the reason I'm mentioning it because I know it's real because Gibbons responded to that tweet and confirmed it, and then said, "Oh, the commission did this or something." So it's like, oh, okay, well, if you're directly responding to it and it's directed towards you, then obviously it's real. But yeah, I guess they're in the process of banning him or something. So I don't know. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, that's definitely an interesting dynamic there. Also on the card, Raymond Ford remains undefeated with the 12-round unanimous decision win over former world champion Jesse Magdaleno, who takes the second loss of his career. Ford wins by scores of 119, 107 twice and 116, 110. Instead of focusing on Ford here, obviously he got the win. What happened to Jesse Magdaleno?
Yeah, I saw the interview before the fight with Eddie Hearn, where I think he said that Jesse reached out to him and asked pretty much for a couple of fights, and if he still had it, would Matchroom kind of sign him up? So yeah, they gave him pretty much like a trial, I guess, against one of the up and coming prospects in Raymond Ford, and Raymond Ford looked really good, dude. That was a great performance, I thought.
Yeah,
definitely one where you can kind of like, okay, this guy is like legit, because Jesse Magdaleno he's a good boxer. I remember me and you watching him at, was it the LAFC stadium in on the Top Rank show, and it was kind of like another one of his little comeback fights, and he still has it. He can turn it on. He's just a little bit hot and cold in his performances. But yeah, I think, Raymond Ford looks like he's the real deal, and it's onwards and upwards from there for him. I think he's didn't really give Magdaleno any chance to do anything. He just kind of shut him out.
Yeah, that was tough. But we'll see. We'll see how if he tries to keep going, because taking a big loss like that with those scores, could be deflating to your ego. So we will see. And also, former National Gloves champion, and Matchroom signed him a couple years ago. I think they signed him just after the Chavez Jr. Danny Jacobs fight, because I remember we were right there for that fight, and also asked Eddie Hearn about it in the Fighter Hotel the next morning after the event. Mark Castro remains undefeated at 10-0 with a 7th round TKO over Ricardo Lopez Torres, who takes the 7th loss of his career. So obviously they're still building Castro. Let's see how it goes. It's still going to be a lot of time before they get him in there with any kind of significant name. So that's still going to keep going into the future. It's going to be, I think, at least a couple of years before we see any traction on that investment there. Also, this past Saturday from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey on ESPN, Shakur Stevenson remains undefeated as well at 20-0 with a 6th round TKO over Shuichiro Yoshino, who takes the first loss of his career. I think we picked Stevenson last week. The only thing that was the unknown was that Yoshino was undefeated. Like, sometimes these unknown guys come in and become the spoiler. But based on Stevenson's talent, you can just tell every time he's in the ring with any of these guys, it's not even he's like a level, but he's like multiple levels above a lot of these guys. And now that he's at 135, I still think that Stevenson, if he fights all these other lightweights, Ryan Garcia, Tank Davis, Teofimo, not Teofimo anymore, he's at 140, but you put him against Devin Haney, Loma, I think Stevenson beats all of them. I think he's the guy. In terms of talent, he beats all of them. In terms of box office, obviously it's a little different. But Stevenson, in terms of talent and getting the victory, Stevenson beats them all. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think so. I don't think you're wrong at all. Especially like every time he steps up, he still cruises it. Like beating like Valdez, and then, coming in and looking levels above Yoshino. He looks so calm when he's in there as well. And just everything he does is just done with ease. And yeah, that performance looked like he was in like 3rd gear. It looked like he had several more gears to go. And at times, that's what I'd like to see him do. Just when he's in there with some of these guys, just slip it up and get them out there. Because I know for some reason, some guys on Twitter didn't like the performance. I couldn't.
Well, but Stevenson's always had that aura follow him for last several fights. Like, he's he's a technical boxer. He's kind of like Mayweather. He can break you down. He's very good at placing his punches. But people want to see obviously people get bored and they're like, oh, come on, man, we don't want to see this. Like, we can appreciate the technicality behind the boxing aspect, but that's not surprising to me. People are always talking crap about it.
But he stopped him.
If it
had gone 12 rounds, I could kind of get it. But he didn't. He just kind of took him apart.
I mean, it could also be respective fans of just other lightweights. There's a lot of big name lightweights, at 135, and people. It could be the fans of Ryan or Davis. It just could be those people who just want to discredit the other fighters because they want their favorite fighter to be elevated. That could be it too. So, I mean, it's something you don't really pay too much attention to. Boxing Twitter isn't really as big as we think it is. We follow it because it's, we're hardcore fans and we do it for the show and to produce content, but it's really not, a significant percentage of the boxing fandom. So for something like this, at least
5-10 years from now, that group, Shakur, Ryan, Devin, Teofimo Lopez,
Davis.
So let's throw Davis in there, like the 5 kings or princes of this generation. You have Shakur coming out with probably the best career, best resume.
Yeah, but in terms of money, who's going to make the most money?
From boxing, probably Davis or Ryan, maybe. If Ryan beats Gervonta and goes on and starts, fulfilling the potential that people see and knocking people out with the following that he has, and if that can generate into buys and stuff like that, then Ryan. But we both have Ryan losing that fight to Gervonta. So let's see. If Shakur is already a 2-weight world champion, and then you said you think he defeats most people at this division, he's going to be a 3-weight world champion,
right?
And then
then he goes to 140, and I think he ends up ending his career at 147.
Wow! So he could be 4, even 5 if he goes up to 147 and manages to get a piece of a trinket up there. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's nuts. Also on the card, Keyshawn Davis remains undefeated as well, 8-0 with the 9th round TKO over Anthony Yiggett. This was a dominant showing by Keyshawn Davis, who was also a recent signee from that U.S. Olympic team for Top Rank. Keyshawn Davis, obviously, let's see how far. Actually, this is an interesting question. Who gets to a significant fight first? Like, who takes that next level step? Keyshawn Davis or Mark Castro?
Keyshawn Davis, by far.
You said that with such confidence, Mike.
Well, regular listeners to the show know that I don't rate Mark Castro. Keyshawn Davis is one of those guys where, you just saw him in the amateurs, and then when you were like, okay, let's see if he can turn it into the pros. You probably thought he could. He gets into the pros, he's the real deal. Like, anybody who goes oh, that Keyshawn Davis guy, he's a great fighter. You're like, well, no fucking shit, dude. It's not exactly hard to see. The guy is just fucking. It's when he's going to win a world title, unless he goes off the rails and stuff like that, and doing wild things and partying and wastes his talent. It literally is. It's when is he going to be a world champion? Just got to stay away from that and injuries, because dude's 8-0. He's fighting Anthony Yiggett, who's had 30 fights, and he handled him quite easily. This just goes to show, right, what he is. He's surrounded by talent as well. You see him in there with guys like hanging around with Crawford and stuff like that. And as far as we know, Crawford's pretty down to earth, pretty locked on what he does, doesn't he? He doesn't really go out there partying, blowing his money and stuff like that. So he's surrounded by good people in the sport. So yeah, he's another one like Shakur, probably future world champion, could be God knows how many divisions as well.
Running off that card, Jared Anderson, another heavyweight, same signing class as Keyshawn Davis, gets the victory over George Arias, who takes the first loss of his career. This was also a pretty decent matchup too, in terms of Anderson going up somebody against Arias undefeated, gives him the first loss of his career. You know, we're going to talk about it. We're going to expand a little bit more on Top Rank's signings in terms of long-term investment. But our guest of the weekend, Jay Chaudhry, mentions Top Rank signings and investments, and them signing like pretty much the whole Olympic team in the U.S. to their stable. You know, before we know it, that Olympic team that Top Rank has, you know, Keyshawn Davis, Anderson, and I know I'm forgetting some other ones. They're all going to pop up and be the next successors, right?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Top Rank, like we've touched on before, probably has the best stable of up-and-coming prospects in world boxing right now, I would say. They definitely got a better stable than the Matchroom. Golden Boy have a few, but not too many. PBC never really invest in youngsters, prospects, really. They kind of get more of your popular stars that are already there and pay them big money to attract an audience. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting over the next few years how many, world champions Top Rank have.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. Moving on to fight previews this upcoming Saturday, the 15th of April, from the Copper Box Arena in London. Heavyweight matchup. Joe Joyce, 15-0, goes up against Zhang for the WBO interim heavyweight title. What do you think about this fight?
Should be an interesting fight while it lasts. I think Joe Joyce will take him out. I'd be surprised if Zhang manages to knock out, Joe Joyce. Two very big bodies in there, two juggernauts really. But Joe Joyce is the more well-rounded fighter overall, and this is just another fight. Whilst he's waiting for his eventual title shot at someone like Joe Joyce later down the line, hopefully he'll get it. I'm sure we all want to see Joe Joyce in there with one of the three: Usyk, AJ, or Tyson Fury. So let's just hope he eventually gets it, because he did start his pro career a little bit later, but he's definitely fun to watch, because he'll take one or two punches to land one. So he's always good money to watch on TV.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely the juggernaut. Also on the card, Denzel Bentley, 17-2-1, goes up against Kieran Smith for the British middleweight title. What do you think about this fight?
Good fight. I like watching Denzel Bentley. I think he's a very, very skilled fighter, so it's going to be interesting to see him in there with Kieran Smith. Quite often, the British level fights are very well matched, two good fighters, and then obviously, in the UK we put a lot of prestige behind that belt. So a lot of guys go in there and they give it their all. So yeah, I would definitely try to catch that if you're going to tune in.
Also, Sam Noakes, 10-0, goes up against Karthik Santish Kumar, 10-0. Both the exact same records, 10-0, for the Commonwealth and WBC International Silver Lightweight title. There's some heavy, important gold here on the line for this fight. What do you think about it?
I don't know too much about Karthik Kumar, to be honest with you, but Sam Noakes is a good fighter, both unbeaten, both going in there for a Commonwealth and then obviously a WBC trinket, I guess. But yeah, Sam Noakes has always been good, when you watch him on the Frank Warren card. So definitely tune in to watch that, get that little taste of that before you go into the two bigger fights of Denzel Bentley and Joe Joyce.
Also, rounding off that card, Michaela Mayer, 17-1, goes up against Christina Lintau. I know I'm butchering that. Who's 14-2. So Mayer, I'm assuming she's still with Top Rank, right? But they're just letting her kind of go across on these other cards.
Yeah, man, as far as I know, she's still with Top Rank, and I just find it's interesting that I'm guessing women's boxing is just more popular in the UK because, like Michaela Mayer keeps going over to the UK to fight. Clarissa Shields went over to the UK to fight. So I'm guessing they just get more eyes on the product over there, maybe thanks to Eddie Hearn having so many women's fighters in his stable. And like you touched on, Top Rank and Frank Warren have that kind of partnership where they, share the broadcasters and, they fight into fights between their stables. So, yeah, when I saw it was on a Frank Warren card, I'm assuming that must be the reason why, because there isn't too many female boxers over here in the US on, Top Rank and Golden Boy and PBC. They don't really have hardly any, probably like 3 or 4 fighters between all 3 of those stables.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Running off the last lap here of the last round podcast. News and notes. Edgar Berlanga, who just recently signed with Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing, now has an official date for his debut under the Matchroom banner and DAZN. June 24th at the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden in New York City. He will be taking on, and I believe he's still with Golden Boy Promotions, Jason Quigley, the former WBO middleweight title challenger. We talked about this when this was announced earlier today or when the news broke, but Jason Quigley, I think, and I could be wrong, I could be just completely overanalyzing it here. I think Quigley has a better shot than people think. What do you think?
It's an interesting one. It is an interesting one. And I can see where you're coming from, because obviously Berlanga has struggled in some of his fights and, probably really should have lost one of them in particular. I'm thinking if Berlanga has any sense in his head, and Eddie Hearn has openly said that he's going to give him kind of like a comeback fight, which this is supposed to be that, then a little step up, and then at some point next year, probably either May or September, he's getting that Canelo paycheck. He's getting that, as Conor McGregor says, that red panty night. So if I was him, I'd be in that gym. You just got a year of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, and then everything that he's done comes together that night when he gets that Canelo paycheck, win, lose, or draw. He's going to make momentum for life-changing money. But you do see, like, Berlanga seems to like the limelight a lot, like all the clubs and the planes and the cash and the women and the clubbing and stuff like that. So just put that on the back burner for a little bit while she get these 3 fights in, and then that's you. If you don't spend crazily, that's you probably set for the rest of your life.
I mean, I think it's good for the sport if he, I know Top Rank, he ended up leaving then. They split up, and now he's signed with Matchroom, and people think, oh, okay, he's not as good as people think he is. I hope he finds it, because he does have some type of star power. If there's something there, if he can tap into it, but he has to also keep winning. So you're right. A Canelo matchup in the future, in the next couple of years, especially now being under the same, I guess, promotional team, quasi-promotional team, I guess. Puerto Rico versus Mexico, it could be big, especially if they fight in New York City or even in Vegas. It could be big. It could be money-wise. But obviously, Canelo doesn't have to prove anything. Canelo is just like, hey, whoever's there. But it's Berlanga. Now it's a proving ground for him.
Has Canelo done any of his big fights in MSG?
He did. He fought in New York against. Didn't he fight in New York? He did fight in New York.
Just off the top of my head, I was just trying to think. He probably has.
No, I'm sure he has. Now you have me.
When he fought,
the British guy,
Billy Joe, Callum Smith.
No, Rocky Fielding.
That was MSG.
Well, it was in New York.
Oh.
Yeah, it was in New York. But yeah, that could be big, man. That could be Berlanga, Canelo, but it's obviously all the everything's on Berlanga's plate right now. He has to prove it. So we'll see how it does. And then also Anthony Joshua's had that tweet just after his last fight against Franklin saying, oh, he's going to be back in the next 90 days. People who took him seriously on that, I don't know why people took him seriously. I didn't put a lot of stock into it. Well, then he posted something on his social media recently within the last couple days or week or so saying, oh, I'm actually not coming back until December, which is, what is that, 9 months away or something like that? So it's like, okay, and people are like, why did he do that? And Eddie Hearn even said, I don't know. Are we really surprised here? Are you really surprised? There's people like they seem like they're so insulted by it and so bothered by it. I didn't take him seriously when he said he was coming back in 90 days. I was like, I don't think that's true.
I did, only because I thought from watching that interview with AJ, then watching other interviews with Dillian White, and Dillian kept saying like, oh, I think I'll be back in like June or July. And then they kept saying like, oh, Joshua's going to be out 3 times this year. after this fight, he's going to be back out in 12 weeks. So I was like, okay, well, those timelines kind of match up. So okay, we're probably going to see him against, White in the summer. And then obviously we'll probably see him against one of the big name guys at the end of the year. So I don't know, was that performance against Franklin kind of shaky where it's got Eddie Hearn and 258 and those guys thinking to themselves okay, we need to get one of the big fights and cash out? Is that something that they're thinking? Do we need a Wilder or a Fury fight at the end of the year because, AJ is not AJ anymore?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Also, I wanted to go back on this because I just saw this on Twitter from a tweet that was from earlier today. Keyshawn Davis, because I asked you about Keyshawn Davis and Mark Castro. Keyshawn Davis actually tweeted out earlier today. He said, "What weight does Mark Castro fight at?" And he put the eye emoji, pretty much saying, "Hey, I might be open to that fight." For Castro, I don't think that's a good step at all. I think they fight right now. Davis beats him easily, but I think it was funny because I asked you about them, who's going to get to that next level first? And you said Keyshawn Davis easily. And then Davis, I look right now, a couple minutes later, and he tweeted about him hey, what weight does Castro fight out? So, but if you put them together, that's an interesting fight too, regardless. Even though Davis would be the favorite, it's cool because it's the names, the two young guys. That'd be very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested. They won't do that to Castro. I think they'll wrap him in cotton wool, and
at least for now.
Well, as soon as he steps up with somebody that's got a bit of a chin and actually punches back with some power, he's going to go the same fate as Gabe Flores.
Possibly. You said it, not me. You said
it. I've said it several times. They're both very similar. They still have that amateur style with no pop, and that doesn't really work in the pro level. So I don't see.
We're gonna get him on so you can confront him. We'll try. That'll make for some good ratings here. We'll try it out. But once again, guys, we do have everybody who stayed up until this point. We appreciate it, but we do have our guest of the week and producer Jay Chaudhry. He talked about, this was a very, very interesting and intriguing conversation with him. He talked about a lot of the data and business side of the sport of boxing, not even just sport of boxing, but combat sports. We touched on the Endeavor buying WWE. How could that affect boxing in the future? Showtime's layout and future, now that Paramount has kind of combined with them. Will Showtime be around? He also gives his take on, he thinks HBO should remain in the game now that YouTube boxing and these influencers kind of made their footprint in. And he talks about other data analytics and what it's a very, very interesting conversation. If you're definitely interested in the business side of boxing and the media side of boxing, data analytics and all that, you'll definitely appreciate this conversation. Right, Mike?
No, 100%. Great takes by Jay. Obviously, he looks at things in a different way than we do, just being the normal casual fan. So it's definitely interesting, especially, for those guys that are on social media and you hear all those debates about, pay-per-view numbers. He kind of gives a clearer indication on how that works and how they judge them and rate them. So,
yeah, definitely interesting, and he'll definitely be back. So once again, guys, we appreciate it. Hopefully, you guys appreciate the fight reviews and previews and all the latest news around the sport that we give you each and every week. And here is our interview of the week with producer, digital executive, filmmaker. He has his footprint all over the television and digital landscape. In our guest of the week, one more time, in Jay Chaudhry.
And now it's time for the last round interview of the week.
We appreciate you joining us, Jay.
Thank you for having me, boy. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So for our listeners who might not be aware of who you are, obviously hardcore boxing fans have probably seen your tweets and your opinions online, Twitter, Instagram, and all that, because you do follow the sport. You do chime in here and there sometimes. So for our listeners who aren't technically aware of what your background is, can you kind of give us a little bit of an overview of what you're currently doing and what your background and how you got to this point today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I tell them I'm a pretty big voice in the boxing space, particularly for my views on the digital landscape, analytics, and just overall data that's being pushed out into the marketplace and its position in new media sports. In 2017, I founded Break Media Group, which was boxing's first ever content factory, where we focused on the production, distribution, and marketing behind some of our boxers here. As you can imagine, in 2017, stuff like name, image, and likeness, or even just the world of YouTube and TikTok was like non-existent in the sport. So being that I came from that space, I thought it'd be a really cool idea to create a company where boxers can call a home for their digital side to their careers. So in between 2017 and 2020, we signed 55 plus athletes. A lot of amazing case studies were done through that company, particularly two that stand out where was one Philo Greco, fellow Canadian boxer. Through his content strategy in creating a first ever food and travel show, he got the Amir Khan fight, which ended up paying massive dividends for him. And then beyond that, we signed up a guy named Money Powell, who we got a Pizza Hut sponsorship deal for. And once again, that's another amazing case study because prior to Money Powell, the last time Pizza Hut even sponsored a boxer was Peter McNeely, Mike Tyson, and Marvin Hagler back in the 80s. So we did some really, really great stuff for Break Media Group. Unfortunately, the company didn't really close up. I instead transferred over to the NBA NFL space simply just because there wasn't enough funding behind Break Media. And typically when you're raising rounds in startups, like you do have to have some kind of backing, right? And so it's really hard for us to get corporate dollars just because boxing wasn't it. It wasn't hot. And so we did try going after networks. I did talk to every single network exec that you can name, talk to every single promoter. Nobody wanted to get behind it. And so we just kind of had to make that decision and say, okay, you know what, we did enough for the sport. And maybe we can revisit this at another time. And so in 2020, I took my talent to Players TV, which I was producing and directing and spearheading as the head of production there on behalf of athletes like Travis Kelce, Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, Dave Lillard, CJ McCollum. And so, just really getting my hands wet on the pro games and the elite athletes of the world. And right now, as of today, I'm still very much involved in sports, still very much involved in as a voice in boxing and as a content creator and as a producer and filmmaker, and just happy to see where boxing's headed.
Absolutely. So you tweeted out, there was obviously some big news within the last week and a half or so about in the combat sports world, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. Endeavor Group, who owns the UFC, recently purchased or announced the intent to, I guess it has to be go through regulation in terms of approval and all that, but it seems like it will happen. They announced that they will be purchasing WWE Professional Wrestling, and you sent out a tweet around probably that day or sometime within those couple of days of that news breaking. I'm going to read it to you, and then I want to get your take on that whole situation. You said, "Everyone's talking about WWE's potential acquisition by Endeavor, but are we missing the bigger picture? Endeavor's size and influence could make them a force to be reckoned with within boxing, owning the fan base. It's time to pay attention to the bigger game at play here." What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so Endeavor deal with WWE is a very strong indication as to what's going on in the marketplace. So everybody's after one thing, which is attention. And as we're moving into a much more advanced space and technology where every sport's going to a streaming device, I think it's very important to understand what the eyeballs are going to eventually be. And so Endeavor and UFC definitely see that. And because they're attached to a massive platform like ESPN Plus and Disney, they're well aware of the potential fan base acquisition that's at stake. So when you're talking about billions of views, billions of sponsorship dollars, billions of advertising dollars, pay-per-view, live shows, cross promotions, cross branding, cross characters, cross storylines, there's a lot of potential for that. And it's obviously the potential, as we can see in the number of values, like in the billions. It'd be very easy for a company like Endeavor just to kind of march their way into the boxing space and completely take over. It doesn't take an Al Heyman or Bob Arum or an Oscar De La Hoya to like even, make them feel frightened to step into the space. So, my tweet was pretty much just in reference to the fact that, look, there's obviously a fan base that's here. We obviously seen a lot of crossovers in boxing and in WWE. I was kind of upset in the undertone of my tweet because, in a way, I grew up remembering boxers, co-signing with WWF. You guys remember those days, right? Where Tyson would come in and Ali would come in and it's kind of like a territorial thing at that point where boxing should have been the forefront of this deal. And they weren't, simply because of the fact that, that's another whole conversation we can have for hours there. But my main point of that tweet was the fact that, the bigger picture here is that it's not going to take a lot for a company like Endeavor to come into the space and completely take over. And the fans would love it as well.
Jay, you said a couple of times there you think it'd be quite easy for them to come in and take over. Just, with your experience, how do you think they would do that?
I mean, from what standpoint? What do you mean by that? How would they do what?
Like, how would they do that? Would they just go in and purchase like a Matchroom? What would be the footsteps forward to
I think, I tweeted this out. That's a good question. Thanks for that. But I think I tweeted this out a few months ago. I said, what would the valuation of boxing be, right? And I want to ask you guys this question as well, because it's a fun conversation to have. Like, if somebody were to put together all the promotion companies underneath one umbrella, what does the cost of that look like? If you put PBC, GBP, TR, Matchroom, all underneath one umbrella, what's the valuation for something like that? And I had some pretty crazy people reply to me like billions or millions or hundreds of millions. And it's like, it's a fair question to ask, but it's also a very dormant question just because of the fact that half of the boxers that we're relying on are out of the way to retirement anyway. Like the Tyson Fury, the Floyds, they're gone. You know what I mean? Floyd Mayweather, the biggest cash cow. He's not even fighting anymore. Deontay Wilder, he's not worth anything anymore. So it's really interesting to put a dollar value on it. And so that's what I'm saying, that if Endeavor wanted to, they could just start their own league. But I'm talking the long run. I know it's very hard to picture what that would look like because we're so used to as hardcore boxing fans, we're so used to the characters that we know. But if you're taking 20, 30, 40, 50 years of building brand building, which WWE and UFC have proven to do very well, it's not going to take a lot for them to start building a whole new chapter of boxing, which the fans would rather watch than our little shows that happen on pay-per-view through the actual boxing channels that we're used to. Because we haven't developed yet as a digital society or a community to make us worth a fucking penny, you know what I mean? So, or a pretty penny. And so to answer your question, it is a bit of a complex question because we can't really put a valuation behind it. But if you were to think strategically long-term, if you're a company who's building a brand, it's not going to take much to have a guy who's probably the age of 70 years old right now. What did he look like in 20 years under Endeavor,
Jay, Dana White's been asked several times about, starting Zuffa boxing, and he always answers that he's had a look at it and boxing's broken. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I think Dana is right in a lot of ways, but he's also a little bitter in a lot of ways because he hasn't really done anything about it himself, right? So it's like, if I was in Dana's shoes, it's like, okay, well, why don't you do it? I actually had hopes for Zuffa when he first introduced it. Okay, let's see how that works. But I think this Endeavor deal was already low-key going on back then. He already knew what was happening, so he kind of just left it as is. But that's just my opinion, of course. I mean, that's not any facts behind that. But Zuffa boxing was a thing. It's still a thing he talks about. And I think now that they teamed up with WWE, it could be a lot more possible. But at the end of the day, it's like it does take a lot more than just announcing something that you're going to do and not follow through with it, for sure.
And if Endeavor did venture into the boxing world, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for asking this question, but do you think that they would follow more of a UFC model where I think the fighters get approximately 16% of the revenue, where in boxing, rightly or wrongly, I think, the fighters get 60, 70, 80% of the money that comes in?
Yeah. No, that's a very good conversation as well. And I think about this often where, because look, we all know, I think we can all agree as a community here that we all understand the system's broken. Have you ever tried to explain boxing to your girlfriend? Like, it's a mess, So it's like, we all know that there is a broken system here. We fail to do something about it because we all get it. We all know what the belts are and what they're able to do and what fighters are doing and who's the gatekeeper and who's this. Like, we get it, right? Because we're in this culture. But the average sports fan doesn't. And so because of that broken system, it will take a company like Endeavor. And I'm not just saying Endeavor. It could be anybody who has that kind of, money backing behind them to come and completely, monopolize the sport. And it just makes sense of it. Here's one belt for each category, guys. It's the dream system that we all talk about on Twitter all day. Like, what would a dream boxing scenario look like? Except it is going to take the cooperation of a lot of people. Unfortunately, it's going to take some people to eventually pass on, in terms of pass away, in order for this to happen, because their voice is stopping a lot of these deals from happening. So I do see a future in the sport where young, fresh, digital executives will understand the bigger picture and will try to almost protest or demand this new system of the sport. And I think it's going to be welcomed by the majority of the fans as well. Even the old school fans like us will be like, yeah, you know what, we all knew it was broken, guys. Let's just go on with this new rule, and it'll just be a thing of the past. But yeah, these are conversations that hardcores typically hate, because we're such a passionate group of people. We hold the sport near and dear to our hearts. But I mean, in order for the sport to grow, we can't just keep using the terminology of boxing has survived all the time. No, boxing needs to grow with the times. Surviving just isn't enough, especially in a culture where everything is more transparent in today's economic society and data, because now you can actually see the viewerships, unlike before. And that's a conversation that, we can have as we go on about how this pay-per-view structure is, defragmented. But yeah, that's my views on that.
Jay, I want to go back to, you talked about the financial valuation of promoters and how, there's people who've asked, and you've had conversations on Twitter and all that about, if you put them all together, all these major promoters, how much would they value at? Would they be valued at? Which one individually, who do you think out of the major promoters in the world right now, who is the most financially valuable?
That's tough, because each one has their mega superstar. But if I was to actually put my money on a horse that's for the long run, not short run, it'd be Top Rank. Just simply because they've been the oldest in the books. They've signed all the upcoming prospects. They're fresh, and they're signing. Every young prospect right now is going to Top Rank, right? So it's just kind of following that trend. Matchroom is doing some amazing stuff, but they're not really in the States as big as they planned or hoped for. I mean, they have AJ, and that's pretty much it. Canelo is obviously a free agent. PBC, they had a few. I think PBC's original years, introductory years, was awesome, but they haven't been able to build anybody after that kind of spree that they had. And I'm a huge fan of that company, just because I've worked with so many of their athletes. I'm a huge fan of the Charlo twins, huge fan of Porter, Garcia, Spence. All these guys are awesome, but it's like, they don't have longevity left, and there's nobody that I can see in the foreseeable future that's the next biggest superstar out of there, except for Tank. But as a promotional company, you can't really just rely on one person either, right? So it's hard. I mean, each one of them has pros, each one of them has cons. My whole thing is I look at the macro, not just micro. So it's like, what is all of this worth, is what I want to know. It'd be very interesting to see a company come in and actually evaluate this from a business standpoint.
Do you think all of them combined would still be less value than the UFC?
Yeah, man, it'd be way less, because sorry, I want to go back to your original question. I'm sorry, I kind of brushed over it. You asked me, what did you ask me? You said something about the UFC and what would happen to fighter pay. Yeah, okay, so let's talk about that. So let's say if boxing did end up getting, monopolized, the Bellator won, I do think that boxing will remain a prize fighting sport. I don't think that's going to go away. I don't think the big events of the year are going to go, because that's the money. That's a cash cow. Dana White knows that too. Like, they had to come to boxing in order for Conor McGregor to make money, right? So that will still be there. I think once, twice, thrice a year, we're still going to get our mega pay-per-view events. That's going to be for like $80 to $100, and people won't mind paying it because the storylines are going to be incredible. Because obviously we've seen Endeavor and WWE's potential there to build stories. And then unfortunately, it's going to kind of just be like, okay, well, just expect the same pay that the UFC fighters get here as well, which will be a very bitter and sour taste, because we all know boxing is more of a dangerous sport than UFC will ever be. And there's a lot more depth in our sport. So they'll have to reevaluate that pay structure for sure.
Jay, in terms of all the broadcasters involved in the sport right now, you got ESPN, you got DAZN, you got Sky Sports still has a footprint over there in the UK. Who? I guess it's difficult to compare, a US broadcaster to a UK broadcaster, but Top Rank came into to that deal with ESPN, and it was good because ESPN has such a global footprint. But do you think that ever since Top Rank struck that deal with ESPN, and obviously it's still ongoing, has it increased the eyeballs on boxing, or at least from Top Rank standpoint, on their own stable of fighters, or do you think it's kind of stayed stagnant?
So that's like a two-part answer, just simply because I can't answer the first part. I don't have those ratings handy, right? I think that's a question for somebody from the ESPN/Top Rank media exec team to see how their analytics are performing in the back end, and whether or not the ESPN deal is making sense or not making sense. But if you were to use let's say the quantifiable theory, I hate talking like a geek sometimes, but the quantifiable theory is, okay, what's happening? Like when there's such an event on, what's happening down the pipeline? That's how I measure it. So, for instance, how I started Break Media Group was like this. I used to watch a fight, right, on Showtime or on Fox or whatever it was on, and I'd say, oh, wow, that's a cool fight. And then when the guy wins at the end, I'd be like, cool, let me look this guy up on Twitter. And I'd be like, what the fuck? 1,200 followers. And then I'd refresh it because he just became the champ, right? And I'd be like 1,206 followers. So I'm like, so wait. And then I'd go back and look at the numbers the next day. Last night's, PBC or Top Rank's card had a record of 950,000 views. And I'm like, wait a minute, 950,000 people saw that fight. How many of them actually converted, right? And that's what I care about. Audience conversion acquisition is the most important thing in all media structures. So I was like, he only had 6 followers on Twitter and Instagram. He gained another 200. I mean, so and that's how my mind started working from there. I mean, there's something broken about this system, and that eventually took me to the Nielsen metric system, which I don't know how much you guys follow me, but I've been calling these fucking assholes out for years because of their lack of data. And it's only as of recent, you can go look this up on my Twitter. I constantly repost this video where I'm talking about how the Nielsen metric system will be out of business in 2 to 4 years. And it's finally happening because they got called out by ad revenue agencies for fake reporting. And it was bound to happen. They were always lying about their numbers to please the advertisers. And finally they got caught. And now new measurement systems are coming in place. Companies like VideoAmp, ComScore, who are doing incredible things in the space of transparency. So what's happening to this, and why we're bringing this back to boxing now, is because now boxing is finally in a place where people can see right through their, right through their pants. They can see them naked. They can't hide behind their fake Nielsen numbers anymore. Now they're just literally in the public's eye, and you're going to start seeing a lot more real numbers, real data start coming out very soon. So a company like DAZN, for example, is already way ahead of the game because people started calling them the dead zone in 2017. Well, they've been quietly building subscribers for the last 5 years. So like now it's like, okay, they're already ahead of the game. So when you're talking the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, they're already way ahead of the marketplace. So it's always really important to pay attention to metrics from the get-go. So for a company like Top Rank, for you asked, it's a twofold question. Like, are there viewership trickling down and converting into loyal fans? Very hard to say because I'm not part of that team structure. But only Top Rank knows that answer.
Staying on that general topic, Jay, in terms of Showtime, Obviously, there was news within the last couple months. They had some new executive heads over there at the Showtime side of the things under the CBS umbrella. Steven Espinoza, the Showtime sports president, he's still in his same spot, but now he reports to other people, and there's obviously the Paramount merger that obviously affect that, and there's rumors here and there. What do you think is the future of Showtime? Is it inevitable that they're going to follow suit of what happened to HBO?
No, because HBO got out of the sport when they shouldn't have. If they just stayed put, they would have had a piece of today's marketplace. They're the biggest. HBO is way bigger than Showtime. But of course, they probably didn't see a turnaround such as the one that we've had in recent years with Jake Paul and KSI and Logan Paul and all these YouTubers finally bringing the eyeball the sport needed to breathe again. I don't think they anticipated that, number one. Number two, Showtime's deal with Paramount is going to be very it's a powerful move. If you look at the chart that I recently posted in terms of audience viewership every month, Paramount platform is like top 5 of, I think it's top 5 of the most logged onto apps in America on a monthly basis, right? ESPN is like number 9 or 8 and DAZN is last, right? But Paramount itself, but DAZN is specifically a sports app. So you need to understand, for them to even be considered in the top 15 of most used apps in North America is a big deal on its own, right? Paramount obviously is not just a sports app, right? ESPN Plus is not just a sports app. It's a content factory on its own. So, I think Showtime deal with Paramount was the step that they needed to stay consistent because they wouldn't be able to survive on their own. No way. Not just in Showtime boxing like that. So, I'm curious to see how Paramount will help Showtime. I don't see anything so far, considering Ryan Garcia and Tank fight just got announced. I have yet to see a single sponsored promoted post by Paramount themselves. I could be mistaken. Have you guys seen anything yet?
No.
Well, we haven't. No.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I stay on top of this stuff pretty frequently. It would have been nice to see, it would still be nice to see Paramount do something, right? I mean, it's the first partnership with Showtime. You got the biggest fight on your platform coming up. Like, what are the ads? What is the content? What is the commercials? I don't see anything. Unless they got something down the pipeline, I'm not sure. The fight's fucking 10 days away. Like, I just don't get it. But yeah, it'll be cool. I had this conversation with one of my exec buddies when they first got the deal done. I was like, you know what's happening now, right? And he's like, what? And I said, Paramount's going to measure Showtime's tick, right? And if they're not going to help promote this fight, it's because they want to see what Showtime is like on their own without our without our support. So maybe they're using this as a measuring stick to see, okay, how much would these guys actually gain on their own without us giving them a hand versus us giving them a hand for the next fight. I don't know. This is all just like, exec talk, digital talk, gossip, rumor talking, group chats and stuff like that. But many of the things that, we do discuss ends up either becoming true in some sense or, right on the money. So in terms of Showtime's legacy, the sport, it's always going to be there. And Paramount's latest partnership with them is only going to help them kind of, get to the next level that they need to be at.
That's actually a good point, Jay, that you brought up about Paramount, that we haven't seen anything in terms of advertisements or promotion on the Paramount platform now, especially now that they've combined. Because I thought about that too, that crossed my mind. And I think that's a very intriguing point that you said, this could be like a measuring stick that the Paramount bosses or the big bosses are looking at Showtime and Showtime Sports, specifically boxing, to see if okay, are you going to sink or swim? This is supposedly a big fight with a big event, these two big personalities who, have their own respective audiences on their own. I think that's a very intriguing point that you brought up, that they could be looking at it like a test for them. Like, okay, let's see if you can do it on your own without our help. Because obviously, like you said, if Paramount gets involved and puts their resources behind it, it should help the promotion. I don't see why it wouldn't. But how likely, if you just had to speculate, do you think that's the case, that they're kind of using it as a measuring stick for Showtime Sports to see how they perform?
Yeah, I do. Before I answer that, I had another Maybe you guys maybe you were following the fight more than I was for Caleb Plant and Benavidez. Was that on Paramount? It was, right?
I think it was just Showtime pay-per-view, right, Mike?
On Benavidez, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was just Showtime pay-per-view.
I don't know. I think I was just trying to figure out if this is their second fight on Paramount or is it their first. I was just trying to clarify that. But yeah, just moving on to your answer. Look, guys, I mean, if I was at Paramount and I signed a new partnership deal with Showtime, and all I've been hearing from Showtime is, oh, man, we've been fucking kicking ass. And I'm like, all right, cool, let's buy you guys, and let's see what you guys have to offer. But then there's a little section of Showtime boxing that's still very confusing to me because I don't know the sport well enough. And I just want to see, is this something that we continue investing in? I'd for sure be like, let's see what the fuck happens with the biggest fights put on our network. Because that's the ultimate measuring stick as a network. Nothing else is going to tell me anything more or less than what I need to know than this fight alone. So if it performs and it does 1 million pay-per-view buys, Paramount's going to be like, fuck yeah, we're going to continue this relationship. That was awesome. Let's do it again. Right? So, or it under-delivers and Paramount's like, okay, well, let's reconsider this. Let's reanalyze. Let's come together on a drawing table to see what we can do. Because if these guys couldn't fucking sell, what do you think anybody else is going to sell now? And I'd have to kind of have a real conversation with everybody, including Espinoza, as to like, okay, what is your game plan moving forward? You know? So yeah, no, I wouldn't put any resources behind it personally if I was in that same Paramount Digital executive chair, just because of the fact that like I don't want any involvement. I don't want my hands wet in this because we're not going to have any clear, concise, definitive answers as to whose hand was weighted more in this promotion, right? So that's just my point of view.
In terms of media rights, we were talking about the Endeavor and WWE. WWE, there's been reports, and I think their executives have even confirmed it already. So it's not really reports, but that their media rights deals and for television rights are coming up sometime in 2024. And obviously, since they have live content like sports, it's a lot more lucrative in today's market. Because there's so many streaming options right now, and there's a lot of people cord cutting, if you want to call it like that, where they don't have traditional cable satellite. It's just all streaming apps. For boxing, I know there's DAZN and they're on the streaming, but in terms of the big players here in the United States, at least Netflix, even Paramount now, they're they have their app and Hulu and all these guys. Who do you think would be the first one to make an offer to jump into that game and put boxing on their streaming platform?
I mean, boxing's already on so many platforms, though. It's on DAZN, it's on ESPN Plus, it's on Paramount now.
No, right. But I'm asking in terms of the big. We're talking about when people think streaming apps, they think Netflix, obviously Hulu, even Paramount and stuff like that. I'm talking about out of those big, big casual viewing players. Any of those? Do you think any of those make a jump?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes. Well, I think that Netflix could play a major role in this. I think Netflix could introduce Netflix Sports. Is that what you're asking? Well, which one out of the big fish would might
correct? Yeah.
The pie? Yeah, no, I think Netflix has a big opportunity there. They're the number one most premium. Sorry, I want to retract that very quickly. I want to put ahead of it YouTube, because YouTube has already been taken over. YouTube has already taken over majority of NFL Sundays, right? NFL Thursdays. Amazon Prime has NFL, right? So YouTube and Amazon Prime already two of the biggest conglomerates who already do the sports. Followed by, which I believe is next, is Netflix Sports. So I do think out of the big conglomerates, Netflix would be number 3rd in line. First be YouTube, second be Amazon Prime, and third Netflix. And look, this is what, just to kind of bring this full circle as to kind of, if you guys wanted to kind of get into my head and why I rant so much about what I rant about, is because of this very reason I just talked to you guys about, which is the significance of content series. In order for any of these boxing promoters to kind of survive in the next 5 to 10 years, it's so crucial for them to start understanding how audiences engage with athletes now. They no longer look at them in newspapers, commercials, radio ads or anything like that. They want to see them in their favorite TV shows. They want to see them collaborating with their favorite YouTubers. So it's important for a company, for example, and I've had these conversations with, I don't want to name drop, but everybody in the industry, top level execs from every promotion company years ago, and I still do to this day. And now some of them are actually reaching back out to me, asking me to kind of re-strategize some stuff for them. And my strategy stays the same. It's build series content for every athlete on your platform. So when you go to a Top Rank or ESPN type of app, you click Top Rank, a bunch of your fighters which should show up in profiles. You click your favorite fighter, and boom, here comes 10 different series featuring Shakur Stevenson, right? And they subscribe to these TV shows just like they do to Netflix. And now they're actually in your ecosystem for life because they pay for a monthly subscription. So boxing executives fail to understand the power of content. They just think if you put on a pay-per-view show behind a paywall, that does the job. Can I take a minute here and just kind of talk to you guys about the pay-per-view model? Because it's something that's significant being talked about in the sport. So I want to spend a couple of minutes here just really talking about the pay-per-view model and how it's blown out of proportion every time there's a fight gets done. There's a reason why I never engage in pay-per-view conversations. It's strictly because I know how it works in the back end. And when you know how sausage is made, you don't want to fucking ever eat it, right? So the pay-per-view model, as of today, where it stands, right? So let me ask you guys a question. When you guys hear stuff like 750,000 pay-per-view buys, what do you think that number means?
That's how many people purchased it?
Well, who's purchasing it? Like, who's purchasing it? You mean residential?
Well, I mean, I would assume that would include commercial as well, right?
Yeah. So if I was to ask like a point blank question, like, hey, 750,000, like, what are you picturing in your head? Like, who are these people, and how does the 750,000 number get generated?
Like residential homes, and then bars, I guess, have to give. As far as I know, a bar, when they purchase it, they have to give their capacity. So I'm assuming if they say their bar fits 1,000 people, they're going to put 1,000 people, I guess, on that.
Yeah, so that's exactly what it is. Actually, you hit the nail on the head. I guess it wasn't such a riddle for you, but it's over-fabricated numbers, right? So when a bar, and this is the most important thing, when a bar or corporation purchases a pay-per-view, they have to put in the final tally numbers of how many people are actually there. So if it's 1,000 people capacity, they only buy the pay-per-view once, right? They don't buy it for 1,000 fucking people, but they sell it to 1,000 people. So it's not exactly 1,000 buys, right? So it's much less than that. And so when you have this number tallied up at the end for 750,000 people, these are not original purchases. These are not 750,000 eyeballs. That's just 750,000 equivalent revenue for the pay-per-view generator. You know what I mean? So it's very tricky when you're talking about pay-per-view because people just think, oh, wow, you know, this fight to 250,000 buys or 550,000 buys. My thing is who, right? Like, who the fuck is buying it? And how many people are actually converting? How many people after the pay-per-view fight? And this is why I started that whole, if you look up my name on Twitter and you type in producer_JC, hashtag buy the numbers, you'll see all the data. I always used to post, I don't do it anymore because there's no point. But every time there was a pay-per-view fight, I'd actually show what were the results of that fight the next morning. How many followers did the championship get? How many followers did the loser get? How many views, how many tweets, how many engagements were going on last night? Because if you're telling me 500,000 people bought the fight, but only 20,000 people were talking about it online, we're missing about 480,000 people in action. Am I right or wrong?
Right.
Yeah. So we have to start having real conversations around the real eyeballs behind the sport, and we need to actually create a system where more eyeballs could come in. And this is why I was saying Endeavor is playing a very big long-term role, because if you ever try to do the buy the numbers on WWE night, you'll blow boxing out of the waters. We're talking millions of people talking about it, hundreds of thousands of people. So, it's a sport that we all love, we all care about, we speak passionately about, but we have to be very realistic in terms of what the sport is actually, how the sport is actually performing rather than how we imagine it to perform.
So what is your ideal reinvestment in the sport? Like, if you had reinvestment advice for some of these promoters or these major boxing executives and major boxing people, if they asked you, how do we reinvest in the sport for the future to keep building our audience and growing. So we're still around in 20 years with a decent amount of audience. What would your advice be?
Just focus on content. I mean, I'm no engineer, all right? I'm not going to come and reconstruct the entire system. We all know the faults in the system that we have. We also know that boxing survives every era. Survives is the key word. We don't move with the era. We survive with the era. And we just make it out okay. But as the advertiser dollars start running out, we're going to run into some serious problems because eventually advertising execs are going to not look at the Nielsen numbers like they have been to impress, their media buyers. They're going to end up seeing, what the fuck? This platform only gets 30,000 views a month, right? I'm not paying for that shit. Mm-hmm. And as that happens, you're going to start losing a lot of money to pay these fighters. So in order to save the sport, it's just about having real, honest conversations about what's working. And right now what's working is content, right? Long-form series, building massive media structures around your athletes, turning them into household names. You can start locally, turn regional, turn national, then turn international, and really start from an early age. One of the things that I'm passionately working on right now is building athlete careers in the college space, right? With NFL and NBA, college level players who are moving to the NBA, in NFL, and building the brand structures now, right? Having deals in place now with these athletes so that when they do move to the NBA, they have a solid foundation in place that can take them for the long run. So it's something that we have to start looking at, which I speak heavily on as well, the amateur boxing scene, right? Let's talk about those fucking dimwits over there who don't respond to any of my emails at all, the amateur boxing scene. I reached out to them with plenty of ideas for how do we create sponsorships for your tournament so that you guys are not bleeding every fucking year. How do we get branded content in place? How do we build these boxers out of the amateur space so by the time they go pro, they got, a safe place to call home? None of them want to respond, right? So the system's already, there's so many bullet holes in the sport where nobody wants to fix and everybody just wants to complain. And the people who make money, they're too busy making money. That's the problem.
Jay, could you see someone like Endeavor? Obviously, they have the UFC and WWE now, or even Matchroom. Obviously, Matchroom have the boxing, the darts, the snooker, the pool, stuff like that. Could you see them eventually just doing their own TV channel or maybe their own app, which is just subscriber based?
Yeah, I do see that. It could potentially happen, but once again, they wouldn't follow the boxing. They wouldn't do that because they want to do what the boxing did to themselves and just kind of seclude themselves. I think Dana White likes teaming up with the big dogs. I think that's his whole PR stunt behind this. Could I say, I don't want to definitively say that he never will. Who knows? He's also extremely egotistical. And if he wants to create his own media empire, he can certainly do that. But I think he enjoys being in the public eye with ESPN. Who knows? Maybe the Endeavor deal would be the first ever broadcast deal with Netflix Sports, right? Like how you just mentioned it. So maybe we put the energy out there into the universe and it could happen.
Jay, in terms of, going back on the pay-per-view topic for a little bit, we got obviously Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Davis in about a week and a half, not this weekend, next weekend. And then we have Devin Haney, Lomachenko coming up within the next couple of weeks as well, I believe, or in the next 20, 30 days or something like that. How do we, because, for example, Davis Garcia is, I believe, reported at $85, $84.99. Lomachenko, Devin Haney is at, I believe, $59.99, $60. How do you think each of those perform in their own respective right?
Oh, that's a tough one, man. Because this is the first time in the sport we're getting a fight of this magnitude, like from both platforms, right? But I'm actually sitting back as a fan, and I'm just going to be collecting the data throughout the entire two fights, really getting a feel for what's going on. I got a couple of buddies over at Open Doors who run data analytics for like some of the biggest sporting events. They'll be keeping a close eye on both events as well. And yeah, we're just going to tally it up to see how it performs. And based on the final results of both fights, that would determine like how do you move forward with price points. Because picture this, if it doesn't really buys, fuck it, $85, $95 is the price point, right? If it undersells, You know, we're going to have to re-strategize as well. Same thing for Haney Loma. One thing I do like about Top Rank, though, and this is why I always kind of give them more of a nod between any other promoter, is that they're not afraid to give the boxing fans what they want. Like Loma Lopez, that was free, you know? And then they're doing another fight with Lomachenko and Devin Haney now for like, you know, $60. And it's like, you know, they're coming in lower. And that's strictly just because I think they understand the long run here. So out of all the promotional companies, I am public about this. I do favor Top Rank from a long-term strategy, right? Short-term strategy, there's a lot of other key players that do an amazing job. Like Matchroom does an amazing job at short-term, you know, promotion, very quick, 6 to 8 month turnaround times with great promotion behind it. Eddie Hearn's the master of that. You know, you got DAZN with the YouTube influencers. They're very quick to hop on the bandwagon, make fights happen. Tommy Fury, Jake Paul, let's do it. You know, let's get this guy, let's get KSI, let's get Logan. Like, they're very quick, they're very witty, they're very energetic, explosive. But Top Rank has always been quietly just building a fucking machine. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I see. I see a lot of prospects being signed month after month after month. All I'm seeing is so-and-so signed to Top Rank, so-and-so signed to Top Rank. They're focusing a lot on the young guns, like the Fernando Vargas kids, Nico Ali Walsh, Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, like Teofimo Lopez. Like, there's heat over there, you know, and they're not afraid to come under value just to please the boxing fan. So I got to give them that.
What about Golden Boy Promotions? Because obviously, you know, when them and Canelo split and Canelo went on his own, now he's been working with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn for the last couple of fights. I think everybody knows that's kind of hurt Golden Boy Promotions, at least from a financial standpoint. Even though, you know, they're still there, and De La Hoya he seems like a smart business guy and it works out. But how do they, you know, they've had to start from the bottom and kind of build their stars again. Like, but how do you? What advice would you give?
I want to make a prediction here. Actually, I think Golden Boy's in the middle of an acquisition. I don't know by who. Yeah, I don't know by who, but I don't know. I got some weird fucking intuition, brothers, and like every time I think about this kind of shit ends up happening, and I just have a very strong feeling that they're about to get acquired. Not sure by who. Not sure who the player is. It might be somebody who you never heard of. It might even just be like a network kind of deal, like DAZN just fucking requires them for like X amount, like let us keep all your fighters, we'll take it from here, thanks. You know, something's going on for sure. And there's a reason why they're not making any recent new announcements either. I just seen Oscar's like recently posting his honeymoon pictures with his girl, like he's not really concerned with what's, you know what I mean? Like there's certain indications that are telling me that the deal's already done or it's being made. And that's why Oscar could give two fucks less about what's going on with Golden Boy.
Wow. So that's very interesting. I mean, Oscar De La Hoya has mentioned in the past, even within the last couple of years, that, you know, he's open to selling Golden Boy. Bob Arum has also said that about Top Rank, you know, if you want to kind of go that route as well. But De La Hoya, I mean, if you want to kind of get into the intricate details, he is moving to Las Vegas. You know, he has talked about that he has a house being built there and he'll be moving there.
Nice.
So, you know, so you're saying that you haven't heard anything concrete, like it's just based on your experience.
Oh, this is just me talking straight out of my ass right now. But it's like, it comes from a you know, a good intention of just being, you know, a fan and somebody who pays attention to trends. I pay a lot of attention to human behavior as well, and like, you know, I've been involved in many acquisition type deals with brands and stuff like that, and companies. And obviously, I worked with some of the biggest athletes in sports, you know, and their agents. And so I kind of see how people act in that kind of environment and culture. And Oscar De La Hoya has been showing me a lot of similar characteristics to what somebody would do if they just made $1 billion. And, you know, he's not really paying attention at building the promotional company at all. Like, have you ever seen him talk about what's next for Golden Boy in any recent interviews? Have you ever talked about, you know, we're signing this new kid next week, or, you know, after Ryan Garcia, check out this guy? Like, is Virgil Ortiz even still a name? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, what's going on over there? I just feel like somebody else's hand has already been entered into the space. And they told Oscar, thank you so much for your service. We'll take it from here. It's just intuition.
Right. What do you think, if you just had to speculate, what would a fair price be to buy Golden Boy Promotions?
Oh, man, if he had a Canelo, it would be a totally different story. But, yeah, I don't know, man. These are fun conversations to have, aren't they? I don't know. Somewhere around, definitely a few $100 million, right? But they'd have to make some kind of commitment to the fighters. And right now, Ryan Garcia is the only cash cow that they have there. Is he or no? Am I mistaken? Who else is that golden boy?
Ryan, I would assume it's an easy number one. That's the number one guy in terms of box office, right?
And then how far is close from W2? How far is that guy away from Ryan?
That would be Virgil Ortiz and Alexis Rocha.
Oh, come on, man. Look at that. Nothing.
Who else? They use Gabriel Zotto a couple times, but I don't know if you want to include Gabriel Zotto in there. They got Munguia.
No, he's done.
Maybe Munguia?
Munguia, probably.
Munguia's not a name. He's the only hardcore boxing know him. Go on the street and ask about Munguia. They'll be like, who the fuck is that?
Yeah, I think in terms of I think Ryan stands alone right now over there.
Yeah, and I don't think Ryan's worth $100 billion. So I don't know. I don't think so. Unless their books show different. Once again, you'd have to kind of be involved in the intricate level of deals with this stuff. You'd have to see the books. How much have they actually performed in the last 5 years? What does their next 5 to 10 year projection look like? But I just think that somebody got involved. They're like, yo, we're going to take it from somebody with long-term thinking who wants to just retire Oscar. Oscar just gave him the keys and said, fuck, man, you do it for me. I can't keep up with this shit anymore. And if I was Oscar, I'd do the same thing. Like, I just lost Canelo. Ryan is my only guy. Now, who knows if Ryan's going to stay with him any longer, right? Because nowadays, fighters are acting like free agents.
Jay, doing what you do, how much crossover or how many followers stay when we talk about this Instagram boxing? For example, Ryan's got, millions and millions of followers, but we see at times that he struggles to sell out 10, 20,000, capacity stadiums. So how many actually do stay?
Those numbers, if I see consistent with my buy the numbers that have a much more of a recent statistic to show you. So fortunately I don't. But if you were to ask me this question last year, I could 100% just be like, look at my tweet last week. I'll show you what's going on, which was people are staying, people are subscribing to Ryan's platforms now with channels now. And this is going to be the battle of followers and audience fans moving forward. So I do see boxing in a place where in the future, when these mega fights are being made, for example, the Tank Garcia type of fights in the future, there is going to be a section in the contract that will identify the follower account, the subscriber account, because they're going to be considered commodity, right? So Ryan can say, hey, listen, I got, million subscribers on YouTube, and if I post this on my channel, I'll guarantee 50,000 people would at least buy my shirt or buy a ticket or buy a virtual ticket. This is another conversation. VR is coming in, virtual reality, so now people are going to be able to buy fight tickets through their goggles. So a guy like Ryan Garcia, whose fan base are generally kids, who really can afford a free ticket to go see him fight, can now buy it from home for $20 in a virtual stadium. So all these conversations are going to start becoming more and more popularized. And so when you ask a question like how many of these guys are actually converting, it's a huge fraction compared to how many guys are actually going to the fights physically in today's era.
I always do wonder with people at his age as well, the people that follow Ryan, those are the guys that probably know how to pirate or find a link for a stream as well. So for like the Gervonta Davis and the Ryan Garcia fight, I'm sure the piracy for that's going to be unbelievable.
Oh, it's going to be fucking crazy. Yeah. And Steven knows this too. Espinoza, all the execs know what's going on. They're just hoping that we're going to make enough impact that people are going to, rush and buy the fight. But, and look, I've had a conversation with Steven about this as well. I said, what is the game plan for this fight? I don't want to get too much into the details of him and I's conversation, but as far as I know, the strategy behind this fight that they're doing, that they promised, they're not doing. Steven came out in an interview, for example, with Marcus Villegas of Fight Hub TV, and this is the beginning when the fight was announced. And Marcos, and I told Marcos to ask him this, he said, what's the strategy for this and what are you guys doing that's different? And he was talking about, we're going to leverage the TikToks, we're going to leverage the YouTube channels, we're going to leverage this and that. And I was like, all right, obviously this guy's a fucking fan of mine, so he's going to be talking a lot about that. But I was interested to see if he was going to follow through with it, and unfortunately he hasn't. If you go to Showtime's TikTok, there's nothing there. It's dead. Ryan Garcia's TikTok is Ryan Garcia's TikTok. He hasn't been. There's nothing that's there that's new. Gervonta Davis doesn't have TikTok. Forget about that. So they haven't really been doing anything different for this fight, which is so surprising to me. Because if I was Steven and I was in that chair and I just got this huge deal by Paramount, I'm going to be like, let me show you guys what the fuck I do. You know what I mean? Like, I actually put extra dollars behind this promotion just to strut my shit, you know, as an executive. Like, let me show you what the fuck I got. You know? I don't know. It's confusing to me at times how executives handle their decisions that they make. I'm an executive myself, so, you know, people can kind of like squander my thinking as well, but I'm always thinking just new generation stuff and how I'd be different in the market.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jay, you know, these are very, very interesting conversations to have. You know, because people wonder about this, especially the hardcore fan base of any sport, but you know, especially boxing, with like pay-per-view and ratings and all that, and fighter pay. People are interested on the business and media side of sports. So this was definitely a very great conversation to have. And we obviously appreciate your insight that you have on not just boxing, but, you know, sports in general. Before we kind of let you go here, Jay, go ahead and plug everything you got, you know, social media, anything you got upcoming where people can follow you and check you out, man.
I'm just happy to be on the show, man. Thanks so much. You know, for anybody who wants to kind of support what I've shared today, it's more or less their responsibility as a fan to just kind of repeatedly go after the promotional agencies and demand the fight that you want, and demand the you know, promotional material that you guys are looking for, and just more attentive to what's going on when it comes to data and the analytics. And I know it sounds like a geeky responsibility, but I always say that an educational fan turns into more of a passion because of that. So just, you know, always continue to be alert in terms of like what's being shown to you versus what the reality is. And of course, I'm always open to engage with the community at any time.
We definitely. And I'm sure we'll have you back on, man, or whenever there's obviously a big business dealing or something. We'll reach back out to you and get your take on it, man. Because these conversations and the insight that you have, and you know, like you said, these are conversations that boxing fans have every day on Twitter. You know, and the business side, the media side. So we definitely appreciate your insight and the conversation we had.
For sure. Thanks a lot. Before I let you guys go, who do you guys got for both fights? Actually, Haney and Garcia. Who do you guys got?
I got Davis for the Ryan fight. I got Davis. I don't know about Mike.
Yeah, Davis.
What do you got, Doug?
Davis for the Ryan fight. I just think that, you know, in general, trying to keep a small opponent off, you need a very good jab, and Ryan doesn't really throw a jab. It's more of he just keeps his arm out there for the rangefinder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the same thing. I think Davis is going to get him under 8.
Yeah. I think we all are in agreement there. And then I think you mentioned the Loma and Haney fight. You know, I know it's easy to say that Lomachenko's like older, and you know he's been around a long time. He's probably lost a step. I mean, it's possible. I think that's, you know, it's easy to say that, but I don't know, man. Like I still feel he might have something left, and it's going to be a tougher fight than people think for Haney. I don't know.
I think Haney just dominates him.
Think so?
I'm so sad almost watching this fight, just knowing what's about to happen to Loma, because we all saw what happened to him with Lopez, and I think this is just Loma's kind of like on his way out / gatekeeper on a retired fighter fight, because Haney looks so big now, dude. Like he's actually going into like his man phase now.
Yeah.
And like you know what I mean? He's a big boy now. He's no longer the little Devin Haney who fought. Even his fight with I think what's that kid's name? The Cambosos. Like he didn't look manly the way he does now. Like,
right.
This kid's jacked now. So I think he's just going to demolish him. It's going to be sad.
Yeah. Either way, I mean, they're both good fights, Davis Garcia and Haney Lomachenko, regardless, and they're all in close proximity. So for the fans of the sport like us and everybody else listening and everything, it's great competition to see, especially with all the complaining that we seemingly do about the sport.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, you can expect I'll have some really cool numbers to share after both fights on the social end, just to kind of show everybody how like it kind of trickled down. Because that's the most important part of this. How do we grow the fan bases like this? And I know a few years ago, we all used to make fun of the fact that, what are you guys counting somebody's social media followers for? And, well, it's because that's commodity now at this point. And that's what it's cool. So, of course, to look at how many people actually converted into a fan, and you use social media platforms as indicators as to how they converted. So it's going to be really cool to see that. Anyways, boys, thanks for the call. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.